You think you're indispensable, Claire. You're nothing but a replaceable cog in this machine. Derek Shaw's voice was icy, merciless, each word a deliberate strike aimed straight at the core of who I was. It was not just a dismissal, it was a verdict, cold and unyielding, delivered with a cruelty that sent a shiver down my spine. The conference room felt like a tomb, suffocating and sterile, its walls closing in as his words echoed relentlessly in my mind. At that moment, I wasn't just losing a job, I was losing a part of myself, the very essence of my existence. 15 years of relentless dedication, countless sleepless nights spent chasing breakthroughs, all dismissed with such devastating finality. I stood frozen, a statue carved from shock and disbelief. My throat tightened, burning with unshed screams, but no sound escaped. How could he, how they, reduce my life's work, my passion, to nothing more than a line on a severance contract? The man who once championed my ideas, who hailed me as the future of neuropharmacology, now looked at me as if I were a stranger, an inconvenience in his meticulously crafted empire. Beside him, Emily Carr smiled with an unsettling brightness, the eager replacement who had already been scripted into my story's cruel plot twist. The board members watched in silence, their faces masks of indifference or thinly veiled satisfaction. I realized then that this was a performance, a calculated ritual of corporate sacrifice. My presence in that room was merely a formality. The decision had been made long before I walked through those doors. As the cold, glossy contract slid across the table, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection, a broken figure caught between past triumphs and an uncertain void ahead. The non-compete clause was a chokehold, designed to suffocate any future I might have dared to imagine. Worse still was the demand that I transfer all rights to Neurogenex XR, the groundbreaking drug that I had birthed from years of relentless research. This invention, the culmination of my life's work, was to become a pawn in their game, a tool to silence me forever. I felt a bitter rage rise, hot and sharp, but it was drowned beneath a heavy tide of despair. How easily they sought to erase me, to claim what wasn't theirs to take. Leaving Echelon Pharmaceuticals that day, clutching a box of my belongings, as if it could somehow contain the fragments of my shattered career, I felt hollow. The city outside continued its noisy chaos, oblivious to the private catastrophe that had just unfolded. Rain streaked down my car window, blurring neon lights into smears of color, a reflection of my fractured state. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to disappear, to let the darkness swallow me whole. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of grief and humiliation, a small flame flickered. It was fragile and tentative, but it refused to be extinguished. They thought they could bury me, but I was not so easily broken. I had learned the hard way that survival required more than endurance. It demanded defiance. That night, I called Victoria Lane, my closest friend and legal anchor in this storm. Her voice was steady, unwavering, but I could hear the weight of the battle ahead in every word she spoke. Together, we dissected the severance agreement, exposing the venom beneath its polished surface. This was no ordinary termination. It was a deliberate attempt to bury me alive, to strip me of everything I had built. But I wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. In the days that followed, a silent war erupted. I launched a counterattack with carefully crafted legal demands, fair compensation, the retention of my patent rights, and assurances that my research could never be exploited without my consent. Each message was met with cold rebuffs, veiled threats, and the hollow jargon of corporate power plays. Derek Shaw had transformed from mentor to adversary, a man who would burn bridges without hesitation to protect his empire. What they didn't know was that I had already taken my precautions. Weeks before the axe fell, I had quietly secured the patent for Neurogenex XR, a hidden shield against erasure. When whispers of scandal began to ripple through the industry, Echelon stock wavered, and internal chaos blossomed. Executives scrambled to control the fallout while I watched from the sidelines, gathering strength and resolve. They called me a traitor, a thief, but I knew the truth. I was a woman reclaiming her power. Nights grew long and lonely. I found myself staring out the window into the endless city lights, each one a distant star in a vast, indifferent universe. Doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. Had I made a mistake? Was this battle worth the price? But beneath the doubt lay a clear, unshakable truth. My fight was bigger than just me. It was for every scientist whose voice had been silenced, every innovator dismissed as expendable. This was about justice, about respect, about reclaiming dignity. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than the loss of title or salary. It was a wound to my identity, a fracture of trust. For years, I had poured my life into Echelon, only to be cast aside like refuse. But out of that darkness, a new fire was born, not of vengeance, but of purpose. I would not merely survive, I would rise. I would transform this pain into power, this loss into legacy. Each day, I meticulously documented every email, every interaction, every fragment of my research. With Victoria's guidance, what felt like a desperate stand began to crystallize into a precise, calculated strategy. The fight was far from over, but my confidence grew with every passing hour. They had tried to erase me, but I was already rewriting my story. This was no ending. It was the darkest prelude to the most defining chapter of my life. The road ahead would be perilous, filled with unseen challenges and relentless opposition. But I was ready. I would not be silenced. I would not be broken. And the world, whether they liked it or not, would come to know my name. I won't pretend the days after that meeting were easy. Each morning, I woke up feeling like I was caught in a nightmare I couldn't escape. The silence of my apartment echoed louder than any boardroom, a cruel reminder of the world I'd been cast out from. It wasn't just the loss of a job, it was the loss of purpose, the shattering of a life I'd built from the ground up. The sting of Derek's words haunted me. "You're nothing but a replaceable cog," and it echoed relentlessly in my mind, gnawing at my confidence. But beneath the pain, a stubborn flame refused to die. Some nights, I would sit alone, the city's lights blurred by the tears I refused to shed, wondering if all my years of sacrifice had been for nothing. The breakthroughs, the late nights, the moments when hope seemed almost tangible, it was all dismissed in an instant. I questioned myself endlessly. Had I been naive to believe I could make a difference? Was I foolish to think my passion was enough to protect me? The doubts were suffocating, but then, amid the shadows, I found a sliver of clarity. I realized the battle was no longer just external. It was within me. I had a choice, to let bitterness consume me, or to channel that pain into something fierce and unyielding. I chose the latter. I wasn't just fighting to reclaim my career. I was fighting for my identity, for the truth that my worth wasn't defined by those who had betrayed me. Victoria became my anchor in the storm. Her calm, unwavering support grounded me when my mind threatened to spiral. Together, we dissected the severance agreement, passing every word for leverage, every clause for weakness. We strategized late into the nights, plotting moves in a game that felt rigged but not unwinnable. She reminded me that power was often hidden in patience and persistence, not just bold action. "You're not alone in this," she told me, "and you're stronger than they think." I began reaching out cautiously, to former colleagues, industry contacts, even old friends who had quietly cheered me on from afar. The responses were mixed. Some offered words of encouragement, others warned me about the dangers of pushing back against a giant like Echelon Pharmaceuticals. But a few saw something in me, a spark of defiance, a refusal to be silenced. It was these flickers of support that kept me going. In the quiet hours, I threw myself into research. Without a lab, without resources, I turned my apartment into a makeshift sanctuary of notes, data, and relentless questioning. The scientific method became my refuge, a way to reclaim control. Every experiment, every calculation was a declaration. I was still here. I was still a scientist. Neurogenex XR wasn't just a molecule anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the fight that was far from over. But the real turning point came when a small venture capital firm, intrigued by my patent and persistence, offered to back my independent research. It wasn't a windfall, far from it, but it was a lifeline. Suddenly, the possibility of a fresh start, untainted by corporate greed and betrayal, seemed within reach. The weight of uncertainty was still heavy, but for the first time in months, I dared to hope. Yet, the battle was far from over. Derek's shadow lingered in every legal letter, every threat disguised as corporate caution. The fight for my patent rights became a war of attrition, each day bringing new challenges designed to wear me down. But I was resolute. I documented everything meticulously, turning every interaction into evidence, every setback into fuel. This wasn't just about a drug or a company, it was about justice. As the weeks passed, I learned that strength often comes from vulnerability. I allowed myself moments of doubt and fear, but never surrender. I found solace in small joys, the laughter of a phone call with Victoria, the quiet comfort of a morning coffee, the simple beauty of a city sunrise. These moments reminded me that I was more than my fight. I was human. I was reshaping my story, not as a victim, but as a warrior. I was crafting a future where my work could flourish on my terms. The pain of loss was still there, raw and real, but it no longer defined me. Instead, it fueled a fierce determination to rise, to reclaim what was mine, and to prove that no one could erase the legacy of a woman who refused to be forgotten. The day I uncovered the truth was the day everything changed. It started as a whisper, a faint ripple beneath the surface of corporate calm. A source I barely trusted sent me a document, internal emails, strategic plans, and carefully concealed memos that revealed the depth of Derek Shaw's deception. They weren't just trying to sideline me, they had orchestrated a campaign to seize full control of Neurogenex XR's patent and bury my contributions beneath layers of legal manipulation. It was a calculated betrayal, designed to erase my name from the very legacy I had built. Reading through those pages, a fire ignited within me, a blend of outrage, vindication, and a fierce resolve. They thought they could rewrite history. I would prove them wrong. This wasn't just about reclaiming a patent or a position. It was about justice, about ensuring that truth could never be silenced. Armed with this new evidence, Victoria and I meticulously crafted a counter-strategy. We prepared to expose the conspiracy to the board, the media, and the scientific community. It was a dangerous gamble, risking everything for a chance at redemption, but I had come too far to back down now. The first breakthrough came when a respected investigative journalist agreed to look into the story. The subsequent article sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical world. Executives scrambled, shareholders panicked, and for the first time, Derek Shaw found himself on the defensive. The board, previously complicit or indifferent, could no longer ignore the scandal brewing under their noses. With public pressure mounting, negotiations reopened. This time, I entered the room not as a dismissed employee, but as a force to be reckoned with. I demanded more than reinstatement. I insisted on autonomy for my research, protection of my team, and equity that reflected my true worth. The board hesitated, but the momentum was on my side. Weeks of intense discussions followed, marked by tension and occasional breakthroughs. The company's future hung in the balance, but I was no longer alone. Allies emerged from unexpected places, former colleagues who admired my resilience, investors who recognized the value of integrity, and scientists eager to rally behind the cause. When the agreement was finally signed, it was a victory not just for me, but for every researcher who had ever been marginalized or silenced. I returned to Echelon Pharmaceuticals as Executive Vice President of Research and Development, with full control over my projects and a seat on the board. The patent rights for Neurogenex XR were restored under terms that honored my contribution and secured royalties that reflected the drug's success. The moment I stepped back into the lab, the weight of my journey hit me hard. My team greeted me with a mixture of relief and celebration. We were no longer just colleagues. We were survivors, pioneers ready to push the boundaries of science together. The laboratory buzzed with renewed energy, ideas flowing freely, innovation sparking at every corner. But the true triumph was beyond the scientific milestones. My return sent a clear message across the industry. Talent, integrity, and perseverance mattered. The battle had been brutal, but it had transformed me, from a dismissed researcher into a symbol of hope and empowerment. I wasn't just reclaiming my place, I was shaping a new era for science and leadership. As the months passed, Neurogenex XR achieved FDA approval faster than anyone expected, hailed as a breakthrough in neuropharmacology. The drug not only saved lives, it transformed them. Our research facility expanded, attracting the brightest minds, and our vision of scientific autonomy became a beacon for others. Looking back, I realized that the truth had always been my greatest weapon. The discovery of Derek's betrayal was painful, but it was also liberating. It forced me to confront the darker side of corporate politics, but also revealed the power of resilience and justice. I had risen from the shadows of betrayal to the spotlight of recognition. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I stood on solid ground, ready to lead, to innovate, and to inspire. The story of Neurogenex XR was no longer just mine. It was a testament to the strength of those who refused to be silenced. Returning to the boardroom felt surreal, like stepping onto a battlefield where the rules had suddenly shifted in my favor. The faces around the polished table were a mix of apprehension, curiosity, and grudging respect. Derek Shaw was there, his usual cold confidence tempered by something I couldn't quite place, unease, perhaps even fear. But this time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I was the one holding the cards. I had spent weeks preparing every detail, every argument, every contingency. With Victoria by my side, we approached the negotiation not just as a fight for survival, but as a reclamation of power. The stakes were high: control of Neurogenex XR, authority over the research division, equity in the company, and protections against any future attempts to undermine my work. From the outset, I made my position clear. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or mercy," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm here to negotiate terms that respect my contributions, protect my team, and ensure the future of the work we've built. Anything less is unacceptable." The room was silent for a moment before Derek responded, his tone cautious. "Claire, we recognize your value. This isn't just about science, it's about the company's future. We want you back, but under terms that align with our strategic goals." It was a delicate dance, each side probing, testing boundaries, pushing for leverage. The negotiations stretched for hours, sometimes breaking into days filled with terse emails, counteroffers, and closed-door meetings. There were moments of tension so thick it felt suffocating, and moments of unexpected concession that hinted at a shared desire for resolution. One key issue was autonomy. I insisted on absolute independence for my research team, with direct reporting lines to the board. No longer would our work be subject to the whims of shifting leadership or corporate politics. That was non-negotiable. Victoria and I fought hard for this, using every legal precedent and moral argument we could muster. Eventually, the board agreed, recognizing that true innovation required trust and freedom. Equity was another battleground. I demanded a significant stake, not as a gesture, but as recognition of the patent's value and the years I had invested. It was about having a voice, not just in the lab, but in shaping the company's direction. Reluctantly, they agreed, and with that, my influence grew beyond my wildest expectations. Perhaps the most personal victory was the protection of Neurogenex XR's royalties. The terms ensured I would benefit from every success of the drug, a tangible acknowledgement of my scientific and strategic foresight. It was more than money, it was justice. Throughout the process, I remained aware of the undercurrents, whispers from board members, subtle shifts in power, and the quiet support of my team, who had stood steadfast in my absence. Their belief fueled me, reminding me why this fight mattered. The final agreement was a testament to persistence and strategy. I was reinstated as Executive Vice President of Research and Development, granted a seat on the board, awarded a substantial equity package, and guaranteed full autonomy over my research division. The patent rights were officially transferred, but with terms that honored my legacy and ensured ongoing royalties. Walking out of that room, papers signed and deals sealed, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. This wasn't just a return, it was a transformation. I had moved from the margins of the company to a position of undeniable power and respect. The scars of betrayal remained, but they were no longer wounds. They were reminders of the battle I had won. Back in the lab, the atmosphere was electric. My team greeted me not just as a leader restored, but as a symbol of resilience and justice. We had a second chance, not just to innovate, but to reshape the culture of the company. For the first time, I felt truly free to lead without compromise. But the journey wasn't solely professional. This victory renewed my personal sense of worth and identity. I had learned that power wasn't just about titles or money, it was about standing firm in your truth and demanding respect. I was no longer a victim of corporate games, I was a force shaping the future. Looking ahead, the challenges remained daunting: market pressures, corporate politics, and the relentless pace of innovation. But with my authority secured and my team behind me, I was ready. The darkest days were behind me, and the horizon was bright with possibility. In that moment of return, I understood that true power comes not from domination, but from reclaiming your voice, your work, and your place in a world that tried to silence you. This was my renaissance, a rebirth forged in fire and resilience. The story was far from over, but I was finally the author of my own destiny. Standing on the stage at the grand unveiling of the Neurogenex XR launch, I felt a mixture of pride and humility that was hard to put into words. The room was filled with industry leaders, scientists, investors, and patients whose lives this drug would touch. The applause that greeted my speech was genuine, a recognition not just of a drug, but of the journey that brought it to life. I had fought tooth and nail for every inch of this moment, and now the fruits of that struggle were being celebrated on a scale I never dared to imagine. Howard Jensen, now the permanent CEO, took the podium after me and spoke about the groundbreaking work and leadership that had saved Echelon Pharmaceuticals from potential ruin. But I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about every researcher who had ever been underestimated, every woman and man fighting to be heard in a world that too often dismisses quiet brilliance. That night, the board announced the creation of the Dawson Institute for Neuropharmacology, a dedicated research division with guaranteed funding and full autonomy, a legacy far greater than any patent or title. The institute became a beacon, attracting brilliant minds from across the globe. Our research flourished in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Watching my team grow from a handful of dedicated scientists to a vibrant community of innovators was my greatest reward. Together, we pushed the boundaries of what neuropharmacology could achieve, always with the patients in mind. Beyond the lab, my equity stake and board position gave me a voice in shaping the industry's future. I championed policies that recognized and protected the rights of researchers. pushing companies to value innovation over mere profit margins. Slowly but surely, the industry's culture began to change. I never sought revenge against those who tried to silence me. Instead, I built something better, something enduring. The scars from my past battles remained, but they were no longer sources of pain. They were reminders of resilience, courage, and the power of self-worth. The world remembered my name, not because I fought dirty, but because I fought smart and refused to be invisible. Looking back, I understood the truth. The greatest triumph isn't in destroying your enemies, but in rising above the ashes and creating a legacy that outshines them all. My journey had transformed me from a dismissed scientist into a leader, an innovator, and a symbol of hope for generations to come. And so, with every step forward, I carried that legacy. One forged in struggle, solidified in victory, and destined to inspire. This was my story. This was my triumph. And this was only the beginning.